we're going through the throes of the Exxon Mobil audit scandal. The Exxon Mobil audit scandal, folks. Well, I have a gentleman this evening, no stranger to you, who understands these issues. He's an expert in petroleum, expert in oil and gas. None of expert when people give you a little paper because you walk around the place begging fit, and then you call yourself doctor. He actually went to school and studied, worked at the highest levels of the U.S. government in this area. He understands these issues, and that is why the PPP, especially by Jagyo, very afraid of Dr. Vincent Adams. I'm pleased to have him with me this evening. Dr. Adams, a very good evening and welcome. Welcome, Doc.
Good night. Good night, Sherrod, and good night to your wonderful listeners.
Excellent. Doc, we have a lot to discuss. I really want to
quite a bit.
I really want to keep our viewers informed what is happening with this scandal. We couldn't reach out to anybody better than you. We got a lot of things we want to talk about in this Exxon Mobil audit scandal, in which 214 million US there that could have been challenged in spending by the Exxon Mobil folks, by us as Guyanese, that the Exxon Mobil folks spent between 1999 and 2017, suddenly dropped down to $3 million US dollars, from 214 to 3 million. It came up, Doc, this scandal, it came up in the PNCR's presser today. I want you to take a listen, folks, at what young economist, bright fella, Elson Lowe, said about this particular issue. And Doc, I'd love to have your take on it on the other side. I'd love to hear from it. Give us a sec. I think we're trying to get it queued. Do we have it? I think we do. Take a listen. Take a look.
The PPP is putting our oil wealth at great risk and is disinclined to protect our national patrimony. Guyanese do not believe for 1 minute that the second vice president was unaware that ministry officials were in the process of negotiating a 211 million US reduction in the questionable expenses highlighted in Guyana's first oil audit. The vice president's history is characterized by many lies, misinformation, and inconsistencies. The vice president is known to be a control freak who does not allow people to operate based on professional competence. When the opposition met with Exxon Mobil's representatives just a few days ago, Exxon representatives stated definitively that this reduction had been agreed to by the government. If Bharat Jagdeo, the nation's chief oil policymaker, did not know of and agree with this outcome, how could the operator express such confidence that the matter was settled? Rather than blaming public servants for carrying out the tasks assigned to them, Jagdeo and his cabal need to come clean to the nation as to what really was going on at the Ministry of Natural Resources. As the PPP scrambles to cover its tracks, we believe that it is a good time to take stock of the extreme financial losses the PPP is exposing Guyana to by refusing to competently fulfill its audit duties. The opposition has committed to working to ensure our people get maximum benefit from our oil sector.
The PPP says, Jagdeo says he don't know what's happening here with this issue. Vikram Bharat, the minister, says in his ministry, this team auditing this thing, suddenly it was 214, it's now 3 million. He don't know neither. What's your take?
I am telling you, Sherrod, and you know, I couldn't say it any better than Mr. Lowe, obviously. But what's more worrisome about this here, Sherrod, is that this is the easiest audit we're ever going to have. This is the audit before we even start production. It should be a piece of cake. Anybody could conduct this audit and come up with these numbers. It doesn't even have the complications of when you start production, you've got all of these subcontractors and drilling. It doesn't have any of that. This year is easy, should have been easy. Now, here is what this, the government wants us to believe. First of all, the IHM market, let's get this clear. It's an international specialized company that does this type of stuff. Okay? So let's get that straight. The second thing is, remember that the GRA went a lot, agreed with it. As a matter of fact, the GRA said it should have been higher. But in order to expedite this thing, we're going to go ahead with this. There was a study done, and I can't remember who published it, that showed normally you get a little dispute. Oh, it's the average is about 25%, to be honest. So the 13% is even on the low side. But let's say we accept it. In any case, they would like for us to believe that this man, our vice president, Mr. Jagdeo, is gonna, we all know, I mean, he's got his thumbs on everything. So he would like for us to believe that somehow there are people under him that are just going out there and doing stuff, and he's repeating this number. He was the one who went to the media and said, you know, this thing is cut from 214 to 11 million and to 3 million. He doesn't know where this data is coming from. A guy just again. So there, you know, at best, at very best, it's incompetence. At second best, if there is, it's negligence. Okay? And at worst, there's some question about corruption. Imagine IHM, you know, the auditors. If we to believe this story, this cockamamie story that nobody knows what the hell is going on, I don't know who would believe that to start with. But if we to believe that, Sharon, remember now, the number didn't go from 240 million to, let's say, half. You start arguing. Well, I know, normally when you're negotiating, you always, well, okay, let's do half of the difference or something. It didn't go from 214 to 107 or to quarter of it. It went from 214 to 3 million, which is what 99% reduction. In real terms, what that is saying is that this specialized company, this international company that does this stuff for a living, that have to maintain their international reputation, they are 100% wrong. The GRA is also 100% wrong. So that's what they're trying to allow us to believe. But here are the impacts to let people understand what this means. Let's just take this easy audit because, of course, there is more to come. And by the way, here's some key points to note also, Sharon. This audit, remember that it was made clear by this administration, they hate doing audits.
We will come to that too.
Right. So this here was initiated and the auditor were procured by the coalition government. So that's the only audit we have on queue right now.
The IHS market.
The IHS market. So that was not even this was not even an audit that was initiated by the current government. So they didn't have a choice. And then on top of that, it had to be leaked. It had to be leaked for us to know anything about it. But so here's the impact to the real man. If you use the 214, like I said, it's still a low number as far as I'm concerned, but let's accept it. Guyana would be getting $107 million because of the 50-50 share. So if you do not get that if that $107 million that we'll be losing could put at least $100,000 US dollar, Guyana dollar in every single household pockets, $100,000 out of the 107. And this is not taking money from any place else. This is what you're retrieving, what is lost out there. Let's assume here's the kicker. Remember I told you about those more difficult audits that are coming in. Right now, we have 5 projects that are already been approved. Well, there's a 6th project coming that will be approved. If you add up those numbers, they come up to $55 billion. $55 billion that would have to be audited, and even more, at least $55 billion. So imagine this year, if you use 13% of that, 13% of that, and you do the calculation, right? 30% of that is 7 point something billion. You do the calculation, each household, and if you use the same 13%, each household will be losing $3 to $4 million.
Wow.
Just do the calculation. 55 billion. You do the numbers, 13% of that, and then you calculate how much we're going to be getting robbed here.
Mhm.
Each household could get to 3 to 4 million. So it wiped out that $1 million that the vice president has been saying it's impossible. It's going to take up all of our oil revenue. We're not even counting the oil revenue above what's being taken away from us. So
Correct.
those,
Correct.
so that is the key impact that people ought to be knowing. Now, here's the other kind of BS that I hear. When the PNC, and I think it was Mr. Norton, who called for a timeline for these audits, etc., you hear from the VP, well, that's going to interfere. It's going to take a long time. When you put such a, well, audits. Here's how audits are conducted, Sherrod. In the initial phase, while you're doing the audit, what you do, you pair exports from both sides with each other. If I'm a drilling export and their drilling cost, the drilling export has to come and answer questions. And that's where the back and forth occurs. It's not after the report is written.
Mhm.
So when the report, and then you ask for it, the proof of the costs and everything, that's where it's supposed to be produced. If it's not produced, it doesn't exist. That's a basic rule. So when the report is written, there's no surprises after that. Exactly, there might be a little fine-tuning here or there in terms of the wording of the audit. But this back and forth that they're claiming happens after, it doesn't happen. All the back and forth is between the exports on the upfront side. I'm a drilling person. I come to talk to you as a drilling person, or I ask a question. The first thing Exxon does, if I ask a question, they run for the export. They say, okay, this person has to come talk to you. So this is not, that's how it's done in any place you go. Now, the other thing, let me touch on this here too. I noticed my good friend Christopher Ram, in today, I think it's today's or yesterday's paper, said, well, if we had this commission, it probably could have eased the confusion. Where that's, I think I lost you there.
No, I was saying it is in today's Tabak News. Christopher Ram is arguing that if we had the Petroleum Commission, we would not have been in this position.
Well, I disagree with my good friend. I disagree. I think my good friend has a lot of, I think he's got a lot of hope, or I don't know what it is, but do you really believe that a commission will be also independent? That's the assumption. We know, especially when you look at the commission, the commission bill, we all criticize it because of the imperious power that the minister has. So here you have a commission that is guaranteed the people who are going to be appointed there are going to be what? So there's no way that you're going to get a fair commission. And let my friend Christopher Ram remember that for the Natural Resource Fund, Christopher Ram's name was presented by the government to be on that NRF, Christopher and myself and Mr. Lowe, because we then made an arrangement with the opposition for the opposition to have two members of that NRF, as you recall. They refused to have Christopher, they refused to have me, and they refused to have Mr. Lowe. So right now, I don't even know who the positions are filled by, if they've ever filled. So that is to show they have no intentions on these commissions and everything else to put anybody unless they're under their thumbs. So, my good friend, one of the brilliant minds and person who's fighting this fight, I hate to say it, but I disagree with him about this commission. That's not going to happen, not under this administration. It never is going to happen.
Doc, let me raise two quick other questions before we head off at this particular topic here.
Yes.
With this audit. As you on Christopher Ram, it is Christopher Ram who said in, I think, yesterday's papers, he made a point. Well, Jagjo was making the point that is not him with this audit, is not Vikram. Well, Vikram said it's not he's supposed to do the audit, is GRA. Barr said he what's happening with this department in natural resources is the GRA. They don't intervene. Well, before I get to Christopher Ram, let me tell you what Jagjo said during the course of his press conference today. He said us politicians, We don't intervene in these matters. But the technical people, the all-knowing Mr. Jagnew, he said, we have a hands-off approach. So you may be wrong on this commission because he says he has a hands-off approach, Dr. Adams. Take a listen in his own words. Take a quick listen to what he said in his press conference on this particular issue about having this hands-off approach, he says.
I've seen a lot of comments about the audit issue. And these comments are justifiable. The comments are justifiable. But the fact that we are debating this matter is only because of how this government has approached the oil and gas sector. Had this happened on the APNU, we wouldn't have known about the issue years from now. Like what happened with the 2016 contract, the signing bonus. It took us years to find this out. Now, we have not concluded this matter as yet, but we discovered it largely because of how transparent we have been. Now, you would recall that particularly the Starbuck News, when they raised this matter about the sloth in concluding the audits, I said to them that this is a matter that the politicians will not interfere with. That it's purely for the technical staff and the technical agency, namely the GRA, to deal with that matter. That if we're not going to rush any staff member or of the GRA or the GRA to conclude the matter until they are ready to do so in their own judgment. And because we believe that politicians must not get involved in, they don't have the capability. You need accounting, auditing capability, and they must not get involved in these matters.
Dr. Vince, you say you don't trust none of them. You don't trust you don't trust Vikram, you don't trust the Petroleum Commission. Jab, you say they're transparent, Doc. It's not he, it's GRA supposed to do it. Vikram says not them, it's GRA supposed to do it. Christopher Ram, just yesterday, he said this is not even the GRA. He says the minister who has the power to audit or to delegate who can audit, hence the IHS market. What do you say, Doc?
You know, it's sad, really. I mean, you wish you can laugh at these things because that's the only thing you can really do if somebody.
He said because they're transparent. That's why we have noticed the 214 million US come down to
that's right,
million.
exactly. Because it had to be leaked to start with, okay? But here the other thing: does anybody really do believe that this government is transparent? One, and secondly, that this vice president allows the technical people to do their work. Let me give you, and then he says, if it was the administration, well, you see, the thing is what they don't understand. There is a history, and there are records there. Let's go back to the short period of administration. Let's go back to the short 20 months that I was there, Sharon. Could you recall a single day that I was not speaking for the EPA in the newspapers? Did you ever hear the vice president or any other person speaking for the EPA every day in the newspapers? Did you hear anybody else besides Dr. Bino speaking? Did you hear anybody else but the GRO chief? And I can go on and on. The guys who's at lands and surveys. You can ask the newspapers or go back to the clippings. No minister or president used to come and speak to us. We had the freedom to speak to the press on behalf of our agencies and ministries. It's in the record. So for him to say, well, if it was a coalition, I mean, it's totally ridiculous. And for him to really say that he's transparent, when has the vice president not only have allowed the technical person to speak, or the newspapers to call him to talk, even though when has he, besides that, when has he ever had a member, a technical person sitting next to him to answer technical questions? Who tries to answer those technical questions? Isn't that he who answers these? And then he spouts a bunch of nonsense like satellite is going to be doing independent measurements, talking in technical terms, and he doesn't have a clue instead of having technical people there. So this year, I mean, to say those type of things, it's so bizarre and barefaced.
Yeah, but Doc, talk to us about that as well, because as you said, Mr. Kemrach there at the EPA, an institution you once helmed as the CEO and did so commendably. Folks are begging you to come back because of the nonsense they're doing now. He ran out the other day saying that there's satellites watching the water for shimmers and glimmers of oil spill and so on. What's happening? What's happening here?
Now, that's another laugh story. First of all, again, I guess he's taking a cue from the vice president to be talking about something that he has no knowledge of. This guy, you need to come out, and when he says these things, you need to come out and tell the public what is his qualification to be speaking on these technical subjects. Zero, zilch. So the first thing is, no satellite. The guy said you can detect sheen to the lowest levels and all this kind of stuff. It's absolute nonsense. So that is one thing. The second thing that doesn't make any sense is you probably need to go read the EPA Act. The number one function of the EPA Act is for prevention. For what? Prevention of a spill. Okay? So you've got to prevent the spill. So even if you're picking up, even if there's a spill and then you're suddenly picking it up from satellite, it's over. Okay? That is why, Sherrod, that is why when I was there in the coalition, we worked with the World Bank to put together a plan, a documented plan that showed an organization chart to have a petroleum unit with highly qualified people with 5 to 10 years of experience to make sure they're on board the ship 24/7 to monitor, to make sure that their permits are in compliance and everything to prevent a spill. You don't wait until a spill occurs and then, oh my God, we've got a spill. It's too late. That's nonsense to start with. Besides what he's saying, here's the other thing he's saying. And again, I don't know if these are deliberate lies or he's being ill-advised or what. Here's another thing that he's saying. They're dumping water into the ocean. And this guy is telling the people that this water is being treated. It's absolute nonsense.
Guys.
To certain standard, the only thing the water is being treated towards, and folks, if you don't believe me, go look at the permit or go look at any document, is for oil. When the oil comes up, every barrel of oil, of course, water comes up with it. So you've got to get rid of the water. So they've chosen, by the way, against all international standards to dump it into the ocean. So they've decided to dump it into the ocean. So now that water contains, first of all, it's about 3 times hotter than the ocean water. It has all kinds of toxic chemicals, lead, mercury. It has radioactivity in it. I just name it. It's there. Let this guy show us where it's being treated for those things. Absolute nonsense. It's being treated for oil because you can never remove all of the oil, right? So there is a standard for the oil, which is for every 1 million barrels of oil of water that you dump, you're allowed to dump about 30 barrels of oil. Now, if you add up, I did some back of the envelope calculation. If you add up the amount of water that you're going to be dumping into the ocean over the life of the field, you're going to be end up, my thing was like close to 300,000 barrels of pure oil by the same standard that he's talking about. But here's the egregious part and the callousness of this administration. This every single standard. I was in the oil field. In the oil field, I used to drill and as a reservoir engineer also. The standard practice is you re-inject the water back into the reservoir where it came from. The World Bank standard said that unless it's not economically feasible or technically feasible, and both of them are not even close. They made the choice to dump it. When I was at the EPA, we stopped that. Go read the Payara permit that we drafted. We said no dumping of water. You have to and you must re-inject. You know what they did? They removed in the next, I think it was a yellowtail after the Payara. They removed as soon as I left, they went ahead, but you know, they're not even smart enough. They left the language because we drafted the Payara. They left my language in the Payara, which says that there shall be no dumping of water. It has to be reinjected. But then when they did the yellowtail now all by themselves, they removed that. They removed it. So all of this nonsense about, and then when you hear they're good stewards of the environment, when I hear the vice president just saying that the policy of the coalition, they won't have any policy. Well, here was the policy: zero dumping, zero flaring. That's the other thing, zero flaring. When we left, we said zero. Flaring is prohibited. Guess what they did? They put in the language into the permit to allow unlimited flaring as long as you're paying a paltry little fine of that little whatever the fine is. At the meantime, Exxon is making probably I think 30 times the amount of money that they're paying in fine just for flaring. So that's the kind of stuff that you hear that is just misinforming or lying to the people.
Yeah, and Doc, let me pick you up on that note, because you're hearing a lot out there, especially as regards the oil and gas industry. Irfan Ali, who puts himself out there as another expert, the little czar under the big czar. He was recently at this summit, the Concordia annual summit. And here they were discussing underneath the green transition. That is the theme.
Yeah.
Underneath the green transition, the oil industry, as you know, that he has run out there. He went to Washington. He's now in New York, and as part of that, he was at this annual summit.
Yeah.
And as you're talking about being good stewards of the environment, here is Irfan Ali say, look, it's a delicate balancing act, but we're so good with the environment. Right? We could pump as much oil as we want pump. Right? 10 FPSOs, and it wouldn't harm the environment because we're doing well at home. Don't take my word for it, Doc. Take a listen to what he said at this summit. As you said, they're talking all kinds of stuff, and make sense of it for us. If you can. I know you bright bad, but sometimes you just can't wrap your head around some of the things they say. Take a look, Doc, and take a listen.
To the world in terms of climate change. And then when you look at the oil and gas sector, this sector is emerging. It's a new sector with huge reserves. The reality is, even if we go up to 10 FPSOs, we will still be a carbon negative country, negative carbon sink. And that is because of the enormous carbon that the forest stores.
What do you make of that?
Again, these guys, I don't know, again, if it's deliberate misrepresentation of what's expected. These are out of the same mouth these folks talks about standards. I don't know if you recall, because I've said this over and over. What their mantra is that it's the cost of development. There's technology, Sherrod. We have the technology for zero flaring, for example, if we want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
That is why the coalition, even Exxon made a commitment before they even start drilling 1 barrel of oil. It's on record. Exxon say we will have zero flaring under the coalition. We put it into. Matter of fact, if you recall, when I was at EPA, at one instance we shut Exxon down when they were not able to fix their flaring equipment. If you recall, when after I left, Minister Edgel, and I think the same Vice President, they said, these are their words when they were questioned, this here is the cost of development. Those were their words.
Yeah.
Exxon said, when I was there, which just, I hit the roof. They never repeated it again. Exxon said that don't worry about it. The reason why flaring is okay is because you guys are a carbon sink. Meaning, for example, we're coming into your country, which is a clean, pristine country, but we're going to mess it up because you're clean, you've got a capacity to be messed up. While at the same time, Cheryl, they're making a commitment with the rest of the world to cut flaring by 50% in a few years. So
wow.
Those are facts. I've been talking about those things. So here is Exxon saying to Guyana, stupid Guyana, that's because that's how they look at us, saying that, hey, you know something, you guys are too clean. You've got a capacity, that's exactly what the president just said. Did you hear what he just said?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If 10 FPSOs, we're still going to remain carbon negative. This the same language? I remember Mr. Edgel, and I think the Vice President Jagdeo repeated those things and say, well, here, it is the cost of doing business, meaning, hell, we clean. The point is, we can produce, I've always said that, we can produce oil as long as we apply the technology. The problem is, Exxon does not want to apply the technology because it costs more. And it's not a whole lot, it's not going to cut into their profits in any way. It's about greed. And these folks, people who are supposed to be leaders, the coalition has stopped all of that. So when he talks about a policy, the coalition policy was zero flaring. And that was documented in the permit in every place. The coalition policy was no dumping of water. You have to re-inject that water back. The coalition policy was to make sure that we were building capacity, like that World Bank document that I told you about, where we had set up a petroleum unit to have the same firepower as Exxon, to be watching them. And then you hear this nonsense from the executive director, well, we don't have to have people on board. We're going to satellite from the satellite. So those are the kind of stupid nonsense or just sheer ignorance. So those are the policy of the coalition. No dumping of water, no flaring, build capacity so that we can monitor the oil industry and have people on site. Those are the policy. If he wants to talk about policy, those were the policy of the coalition when I was there.
Doc, let us circle back to where we started, because I want the people to understand where we are. Because if we continue to do this, if we continue to, for instance, mow down all the mangroves in Region 3, what do we leave for the future generation in the name of development? What do we leave for our children's children and the future generations? What do we leave to them in the name of development, right? If we let Exxon, through some backdoor deal with some phantom people in the ministry, bring down what they owe us, $240 million US to $3 million, what do we have for development in our country? And in the press conference of the PNCR today, Elsinore economists made the point that these people never like audits. PPP never like proper audits because they like teeth bad. But proper audits need to be done. As we wrap up, Dr. Vincent Adams, make sense of this for us. Take a listen to what came out of the press conference by the PNCR. I'd love to have your response on that.
It is incumbent on the government to ensure that proper audits are done. We remind the public that in 2022, we highlighted that the PPP was not even interested in auditing these companies. They allowed an audit deadline to lapse. Stabroek News echoed these remarks, citing Christopher Ram, who termed the government's attitude nonchalant. Kaichor News, on the other hand, has frequently cited opposition calls for audits to be released and the government to commit to a specific date for their completion. Throughout the latter months of 2022 and early 2023, the President, Second Vice President, and Minister of Natural Resources dodged questions on Guyana's oil audits, with the government repeatedly pushing back the dates by which audits would be completed. Faced with this alarming trend, we even went as far as to call for an audit timeline to be enshrined in law, a cry which fell on deaf ears when the new Petroleum Activities Bill was passed. The PPP's attitude has so alarmed right-minded Guyanese that both Kaieteur News and Stabroek News have published editorials in the last few weeks directly condemning the PPP's governance of the sector. It is time for change.
It's time for change, Doc. Where do we go from here?
I'm telling you, sir. I like I said before, that was brilliantly articulated. So I can't touch that. But the other policy, which is a key policy, was to follow the rule of law, which was the policy of the past coalition. The other policy was not to interfere with the operations. I mean, I'm a living example of that. I was never interfered, as you know. Matter of fact, under my when I was there, under my tenure, we shut down some major companies because they weren't following the rule of law. 2 international mining companies. One of the biggest companies, I don't want to call the name, but they came around afterwards and even built a hell of an environmental protection organization. Here's another thing, Sharon, that people, this is very serious now, Sharon, very serious in terms of following the rule of law. And I hear in these last meetings that were held for this new project here, the meeting that were held during cricket and stuff, not to get people to go there, right, to these things. Okay. I heard that even the Exxon specialists and them are saying the EIA, the environmental impact assessment, is the Bible, which is the same thing I've been saying, which set the stage for the law as to how you run things. Well,
Correct,
guess what? These same people are not following. And one that stands out like a sore thumb is the production rate in the EIA. The LISA one says specifically the safe operating limit, safe, shall not exceed 120,000 barrels per day. They're bragging about producing at 155,000 barrels per day. And the EIA has not been changed because you got to go through a process. It's a very rigorous process to come up with that 120,000 as the safe operating limit. They look at pressure, they look at the size of pipe, everything has to come up with that safe operating limit. So they're violating their own EIA that they're saying right now is the gospel and the Bible that shall not be exceeded. So another policy that the coalition had in place when I was at the EPA, and I could only speak for the EPA because the same thing is happening throughout the other agencies.
Yeah,
but I know the facts. So imagine what would happen, Sharon. They're increasing the chances of a major spill, right, by exceeding the EIA limit. So that's against the law to start with, but we are still allowing it. If you have a spill, even the other thing that they spoke about was the spill response plan. When I was at EPA, we refused to sign it was the worst plan ever. And not only me said it, Sharon, the Auditor General came up with the same conclusion. It was a bad plan. So there's no plan, no spill response. And on top of that, you have no liability coverage to cover a spill. They come up with $2 billion. When we were there, that was the language that we put in there to be unlimited. Anything over and above the insurance, the parent company guarantee has to cover it. They went and they changed all that now to $2 billion. Of course, it's in the court of law. And you and I know about the slam dunking they got from Judge Kissoon. So if they want to put these, let's put the record. And I intend to continue putting the record for the public to see before they come out with these outlandish statements. So and then
very well.
Exactly. So but we're the only voice to really inform the public. And you mentioned there, what would be my advice?
Yes, correct.
to the
As
to
we
the
wrap
folks
up.
who are going, is for us to continue for us to continue to tell the truth. But here's the amazing thing about this, though, Sharon. I have never seen in my entire life, and I've probably been in the earth longer than probably most of the listeners and yourself. I have never seen where an entire government is going bizarre over a guy they call a criminal. You know, this guy is sponsoring a conference, but this thing have them doing things that I have never seen a criminal make somebody do things that was unbelievable. Their entire cabinet had to make a special trip to Washington. You've got the president coming out now and suddenly becomes the biggest advocate for black people, talking, for compensation for black folks, because of slavery. And this is the same guy who shut off funding for the what is that?
Strategy.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And then
It's
on
a
top of that,
night school.
that's right. And getting rid of all the African,
Linden Enterprise Network.
absolutely, and getting rid of the key black employees of the federal agencies. I can speak for the EPA, Sherrod. I looked up the numbers today. We had the 16 top level positions, directors in those positions. Out of those 16, there were 9 black folks, which is consistent with the number of employees of the agency. As a matter of fact, they were almost the same. It was 50-something% employees, and that's about 50. So 9 out of the 16 were black. Do you know that they have gotten rid by some 6 out of those 9 top employees of the agency? Wow. And on top of that, the 6 plus an Indian employee, one of the most young, brilliant lawyers that I've ever seen, that I've ever had the opportunity to work with and to supervise. And the reason why they got rid of him, because he was standing up to Exxon.
Correct.
He took Exxon.
They want pushovers.
That's
exactly
exactly
in the agency now.
So
they want firm people.
And people are just leaving the agencies. The agency left, right, and center. There's no capacity building. You know that World Bank report that I told you about when we were building capacity to bring people in? The other thing that we did that was already approved, except we were waiting for funding, and it was supposed to be a 2020 budget, but because of the elections and the COVID, there wasn't any budget in 2020 except for an emergency budget. We had the plan, the World Bank plan, with the 36 people we were supposed to hire. On top of that, we set up what we call a study leave policy. So they're talking about policy to build capacity, because we basically had nothing in the agency. We had a policy where employees are, we encourage them to go apply to universities and get admitted. When I left, a lot of them had gotten that acceptance to university. When they went to the agency, to the executive director, and say, "Here, Dr. Adams had encouraged us to do this. Now we've gotten accepted. Is this thing still?" You know what he told them, Sherrod? It's unbelievable. He said, first of all, he said that what I was doing was illegal, which is total rubbish. But then the second thing he said, that I wanted to turn the EPA into a university, and that's not what it is for. To build capacity, I wanted to.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that I know people are leaving like crazy, and people are walking in. You don't know where they come from. They're being sent from wherever they're sent from, and you hire them. That's not the way we even hire. We had a special
favorites and flatterers.
That's exactly correct.
As Ramston would say.
That's exactly correct.
Doc, we gotta have you back to broaden and deepen on this particular subject matter. We don't cover it nearly enough.
Yeah.
In our public discourse here and elsewhere. I really want to thank you for your time with us this evening, folks. Dr. Vincent Adams is not no fly-by-night. He has studied this area, expert in petroleum, expert in oil and gas. He headed the environment study. Nobody he ain't give you nothing for free. He ain't pay for it neither. And one of the only persons I have seen who this government dismissed, Starbuck News, commentators, pundits have said, you should have still be helming the Environmental Protection Agency in Guyana, the EPA, and not this jagabat that they got there currently. Doc, thanks for your time with us this evening.
Thanks, Sherrod, and thanks for the listeners. Hope to be back soon.
Excellent.